Witches leave behind more than just cauldrons, and some of their relics carry bits of their spirits as well. So for starters today, what appears to the innocent eye as nothing but a fence stake, perhaps left over from a construction project of sorts, holds a history of sadness and evil doing. Possibly being the oldest item that I'll talk about today, the history of this stake dates back to its use in the 1700s. While the name of the witch it belonged to has been lost to time, the spike was originally used in a black mass ritual in an attempt to summon Satan himself to this world. Now the witch we're speaking of had attempted to curse the stake over the course of her pregnancy, hoping that it would become strong enough to take the soul of her womb in exchange for the devil. So during the ritual, she plunged the stake into the flesh as a sacrifice. But while it strengthened her relationship with Satan, it did not succeed in bringing him to Earth. So the stake was passed down as a family heirloom, bringing a feeling of longing and sadness to any that held it. Until it was finally acquired by the Warrens. Yep, Ed and Lorraine came into possession of this spike, and its story was told in The Demonologist, a book penned by Gerald Daniel Brittle about the Warrens' career, and some of the more rare items in their museum. It's quite a fascinating reference book, especially since it came out way before the Warrens were synonymous with Hollywood demonic. So the last I heard about this spike was that it was being held in the Warren Museum, but when you know that the Warren Museum is technically closed, I wonder if any vandals break in, like what damage they could do with something that looks so unassuming but is so dangerous. Also, with my knowledge of how the Warren son-in-law, Tony Spera, is playing around with the artifacts, I'm a little bit worried that this unassuming spike could wind up back in the hands of some fool and cause a lot more harm in the world. A witch's talisman contains a number square and non-standard English words. It is believed that it may incorporate names of angels, demons, elementals, or worse. This one in particular was reported to have been used by a witch, and it's uncertain what the main purpose of this talisman would have been. Look, a talisman can be defined as an object believed to have magic powers, or hey, maybe it can bring good luck. They come in all shapes and sizes. This one in particular was found in a cottage. Contrary to popular belief, most talismans are not worn, even though there is evidence that some folks did wear them around their necks. They're often carried about in pockets, purses, however you carry things. And usually they are kept near the person or object that they are supposed to protect. So if we're going to travel over to Wiltshire, they have their fair share of witchcraft stories. There have been multiple folks across the county that have been accused and found guilty of being a witch. Interestingly enough, Oaksey Village Pub was rumored to have witch crosses as decoration to just ward off demons. Gotta protect yourself, folks. John Dee was one of the best known magicians of the 16th century, and it is said he used a specific crystal to tell the future and cure disease. According to his own account, the angel Uriel gave him the crystal, along with a recipe for the philosopher's stone. So using crystals in this way was kind of illegal, but Dee got away with it. The specific crystal was later gifted to another alchemist, who stopped trying to use it in 1651 when he believed a demonic god burst out from it, at least according to the Science Museum of London. A witch trapped in a bottle is kind of a form of countermagic. So if a witch was threatening you, the defense? Well, you were gonna create a witch bottle. You were going to attract her and capture her in her evil energy. So these bottles were often filled with rape substances or seawater to, well, off the witch. You'd also use pins and other things to impale them, and herbs to repel them. One analysis of a witch's bottle revealed that it contained urine, iron nails, brass pins, clumps of hair, fingernail clippings, and maybe even belly button lint. So the woman who donated a particular bottle to a museum was like, they do say there be a witch in it, and if you let it out, there be a lot of trouble. I don't want to do that. I don't need trouble. Bellarmine jugs were named after the Italian Cardinal Robert Bellarmine, who wrote anti-Protestant literature to counter the Protestant Reformation. So in 1930, he was canonized as a saint. Now, there is no clear connection between the saint and the jugs, but there's a couple of theories. For starters, some folks thought that naming the jugs after Bellarmine was conceived by Dutch and English Protestants in order to ridicule him. And another one, well, Bellarmine was famously anti-booze. So a bottle and its contents are believed to be used as a counterspell against witchcraft. And there's a lot of other examples of this. Witches' bottles, yeah, we talked about this earlier. So these bottles were found focused around entrances such as fireplaces, doors, beneath the floor, in the walls. Why would you do this? Well, you don't want a witch coming into your house. You don't just protect against vampires, folks. So why did we put iron pins or nails into these bottles? Well, it was believed that iron had magical properties when it came to witches or vampires or all sorts of things. Cursed books. Can't talk about witches without them. The Malleus Maleficarum, translated as The Hammer of Witches, was a book originally written in 1486 by Heinrich Kramer under the name Heinrich Instatoris and Johann Spranger, and this book was considered a key manual for witch hunting. So as for its contents, it claims that women were more prone to witchcraft than men, because why? Well, according to the authors, women are inferior compared to men. Sure, and according to the author, this would give women the motive to use magic in order to increase their power. The Malleus Maleficarum particularly mentions the presence of witches as midwives, having a chapter referring to them killing their charges or sacrificing them to the devil. Over a 250-year period, it is estimated that between 600,000 to 9 million people were killed worldwide by the Inquisitor's court, and nearly all of those accused were women. Granted, there were some men. We've talked about male witches before. In Europe, 20% of those tried for witchcraft were men. Anyone who didn't really fit the idea of the perfect Christian could easily be branded as a witch, and quite often the accusation was enough to be tried and convicted with little to no evidence. So going back to the book, one copy was published by the Folio Society in 1968 and was donated to the museum by a Mrs. Wheatley of Bratton on the same year. She had inherited the copyrights of the late Mr. Pennethorne Hughes, who wrote the introduction and was the editor of said book. Now, we don't know a lot about Hughes. He is believed to have resided at Southview Cottage in Keyville, Trowbridge, and was a member of the Wiltshire Archaeological and Natural History Society, and he published a book titled Witchcraft in 1952. Pretty apt. Ah, The Conjuring Mirror. No, this has nothing to do with the Hollywood franchise. Originally belonging to a 45-year-old New Jersey man named Oliver Birnbaum, it was used to practice a medieval ritual known as speculum, or mirror magic. He performed a lengthy incantation ritual known as a conjuring formula, inviting the spirit world to assist him in manipulating the future. So when he was first starting to play with magic, Oliver didn't see a lot in the mirror, but the more he concentrated his attention into the mirror, the more control he gained, and the more he could see. So after performing this ritual obsessively for many months, he got to the point where all he had to do was be like, hey, I want to see this, and it would appear. He could tune into the future whenever he wanted. He also had the ability to project people he didn't like into the mirror and single them out for punishment or revenge. So for example, you'd see a victim in a future situation. Oliver would will misfortune to that person, and he'd see it happen just the way he planned it. And while this sounds like a fun way to imagine something, this would actually happen in real life, thanks to inhuman spirits. Now eventually Oliver got to the part where he was so full of himself, he forgot to give homage to Satan, and as a result, the evil he proposed for others began to occur to him, and the spirits he turned loose on his enemies now infested his home. Look, I don't recommend summoning spirits, but if you're gonna do it properly. So after about a week of hell, this man was so terrified that he called some officials in the church and they were like, hey, please send a demonologist. Who did he get? Ed and Lorraine Warren. They got there and they're like, oh, doors are opening and closing by themselves, everything's crashing and breaking and smashing. Go figure. So Ed was able to reverse the ritual and bless the house, stopped everything, and when the Warrens were about to take off and go home, Oliver was like, hey, please take the mirror with you. And the 5-foot-tall antique lived in their museum. Oh boy. Sometimes things don't always belong in a museum. They belong in archives, and that's for everybody's safety. A very scary object that is housed at the Traveling Museum of the Paranormal and Occult is referred to as the Dark Mirror. Now, the person who owned this mirror before giving it to the museum bought it at a psychic fair and said they saw terrible visions when looking at it. Yes, it is alleged that the mirror actually reflects the biggest fears of the viewer. People have reported seeing themselves age and disappear when they look into it, and some folks in particular have even reported seeing their own dead bodies when they're looking. Yeah, I don't want to look in that mirror. No thank you, I'm good. In Jewish folklore, a Dybbuk box is an evil spirit. Supposedly, a German war camp survivor accidentally summoned a demon while using a homemade Ouija board, but managed to trap it inside this cabinet. So let's just make sure we've got this all correct. Somebody summoned something evil with a Ouija board, sealed it in something else, and people keep trying to awaken it? Yeah, I can see how this is gonna go. Kevin Manus bought the box at an estate sale in 2001 and immediately started having nightmares about an evil hag. Ditto for any friends who stayed with him. So then he gave the box to his mom, who suffered a stroke on the same day. The box's later owners have also claimed that the evil spirit has appeared in their nightmares as well. The last owner before it made its way to a museum was Jason Haxton, who was the director of the Museum of Osteopathic Medicine, who not only had nightmares but developed a strange skin disease and began coughing up red fluids that should stay in your body. So at this point, Haxton contacted his local rabbis, sealed the spirit back in the box, and then hid it from the world with the help from a museum archivist friend. Yeah, it should stay hidden. For centuries, a common wedding gift given to brides of royalty and wealth was an intricate and expensive vase. So back in the 12th century, the Duchess Eleanor of Aquitaine gifted her husband-to-be, King Louis VII, a rock crystal vase. so it wasn't really unusual when a woman in the 15th century received a vase as a wedding gift. But this one was silver, plain looking. There was no intricate markings, no lavish decorations, and it certainly didn't appear to be expensive. But this particular vase contained a curse that would continue to take lives for the next 5 centuries. Not much is known about the woman who originally received the vase way back when, other than her wedding took place in a northern village close to Napoli, Italy. The stories say she didn't know who gifted her the 4-pound silver vase, but she took it to her room for safekeeping. But when the wedding was about to start, nobody could find her. Her husband-to-be searched for her and found her in her room, lying on the ground, clutching the vase with a fierce grip before passing away just moments later. After her funeral, the Basano vase was given to one of her family members for safekeeping, but within days they were also dead. At the time, nobody thought the vase was the cause, and somebody else got the vase. Yeah, you wanna guess what happened next? Look at you, you genius. Days later, they were dead as well. The family finally put 2 and 2 together and reached out to a priest for guidance, under the belief that whoever gifted the bride the vase put a curse on it or made it with cursed materials, and they were instructed to bury it on sacred grounds. Many believe it was buried near the same church where the priest resided, but we're not crystal clear because it stayed out of the history books for the next 500 years. In 1988, an unnamed man happened to dig up the vase, and within it found a note reading, "Beware. This vase brings death." And of course, this guy ignored the note, tossed it away, and brought the vase to an auction house. It's a classic case. If you ignore history, you're gonna repeat it. It was sold to a local pharmacist for the equivalent of $2,200 USD in today's money, and 3 months later the pharmacist passed. And then his family sold the vase to a 37-year-old doctor who also passed away soon after. At that point, people realized the reputation of the vase, nobody wanted it, minus a single archaeologist, who died 3 months later from a mysterious unknown infection. Distraught and afraid, the family tossed the vase out the window, and then a cop found it. Tried passing it off to multiple museums, nobody wanted to publicly accept it, but it's in the archives of one of them now, not out in the public. Also known as Otzi, this Iceman mummy currently resides at the South Tyrol Museum of Archaeology in Bolzano, Italy. Though this mummy was discovered in like the 90s, it's said to be the body of a man who lived around 3345 BCE. So this is the oldest known mummy from Europe, and since he was found, he's been rumored to hold a terrible curse. Why? Well, I think about several people with links to the mummy have died in tragic accidents. Forensic expert Rainer Henn was on his way to give a lecture about the Iceman when he was killed in a car crash. There was a mountaineer, Kurt Fritz, who directed scientists to the body, killed in an avalanche, but everybody else in his party survived, and I could go on and on. Actor James Dean loved his 1955 Porsche Spyder, having had it extensively customized, and he affectionately called it his little bastard. So apparently this car was so transparently evil that Sir Alec Guinness, when meeting Dean for lunch, was like, "If you get in that car, you're gonna be found dead in it by this time next week." Dean laughed it off, and when he was barreling down Route 466 at an estimated 85 miles per hour, there was a student named Donald Turnipseed driving a Ford two-door and decided to make a sudden turn onto Route 41. Well, the impact sent the Ford about 40 feet down the road, and Dean was pronounced dead on arrival at the Paso Robles War Memorial Hospital at 6:20 p.m. But the curse didn't end here. When mechanics tried to repair the wrecked car, it fell on one of them, crushing both his legs. A Dr. William Eskridge bought the Porsche, or Porsche if you're my dad, from a salvage yard in Burbank and proceeded to strip it for parts. So he installed the engine into his race car, then loaned the transmission and suspension parts to a fellow doctor and racer, Troy McHenry. Well, Doctor Number 1 crashed his race car at the Pomona sports car races, and thankfully he survived. But McHenry was not as lucky. He hit a tree and was killed in the same race, so the curse of Little B gained strength. 2 thieves who tried to take pieces of the car were both injured. Somebody who took the wheels also died, and we're not done yet. In March of 1959, while in storage in Fresno, the car mysteriously caught fire and suffered remarkably little damage. 2 melted tires, some singed paint, and the fire didn't spread to any other vehicles in storage. Also, Little B managed to crush and kill a truck driver who was just transporting it. So yeah, it's kind of been in an archive sense for the best. The Royal Scottish Museum is home to an ancient relic that you do not want in your possession. Also known as the Woman from Lem, the Goddess of Death statue seems to curse every family that comes into contact with it. The statue was discovered in Cyprus in 1878 and dates from around 3500 BC. The 7 members of the first family who owned it reportedly all died within just 6 years of acquiring it, and similar fates met the next family. Historians lost track of it for a little while, but then the third owners eventually donated it to the museum before they could perish as well. This supposedly haunted shop ledger was given to Brighton's very own haunted house, Preston Manor, after the Kent family who owned it claimed it caused them to be plagued by ghostly visitors and spectral visions. Now this ledger, which dates from the First World War, was discovered bricked up in a shop in Brighton by a worker who was demolishing the building back in 1988. He took it home, and soon after, he and his daughter began experiencing visions of men, women, and families, and a soldier with a horse. The daughter was told by one of the spirits that the book must be returned to Brighton or else it's gonna get gnarly. So the terrified family delivered it to Preston Manor because they're known for their paranormal occurrences and spiritual events. And a medium visiting the house inspected the book and confirmed there was some bad things coming from it. So like I mentioned before, that traveling museum is home to a lot of objects with dubious pasts. And one of the creepiest is the Catskills Crone. As the legend goes, a pair of hikers were trekking in the Catskills when they came across this statue, which has nails hammered into its eyes and a rope around its neck. They took it from the cave where it was found. Bad idea. And once they brought it home, they saw an apparition of a woman accompanied by the smell of pond water. Yeah, no thanks. Not all historical artifacts are made equal, and sometimes innocent looking items tend to come with curses attached. I'm talking about everything from beds to artwork, jewels, and more. So I hope you're ready for today, and maybe just cleanse the air now before we get started. Well, kicking things off, the fabulously ornate Great Bed of Ware does not want the likes of you sleeping in it. This lavish oak bed is richly decorated with carved figures and a lot of beautiful scenes, and is so big it is rumored to comfortably sleep 4 couples. Allegedly, the bed was made in the 15th century for King Edward by carpenter Jonas Fosbrook, but throughout the years found itself being passed between the inns of Ware, where commoners were able to sleep in it and cover it in graffiti. The disrespect and defacing of this regal item angered the ghost of Fosbrook, who now attacks any commoner who sleeps in the bed that he made for noble lineage only. This great bed is quite possibly the most famous bed in British history and has been mentioned in several literary works, including Shakespeare's Twelfth Night, Byron's Don Juan, and more. So y'all ever hear about Mummy's Curse? Okay, not actually a mummy, but the mummy board or coffin lid of an unknown high-status woman from the 21st or 22nd dynasty. The British Museum's unlucky mummy has earned quite the reputation for causing destruction through its ancient curse. So this mysterious being was found at Thebes in the late 1800s, and tales of its curse started soon after that. It's said that of the 4 young Englishmen who bought it, 2 died in incidents, and a couple folks died in poverty. A string of illnesses, accidents, and deaths following this are all said to be attributed to the mummy. So leave mummy alone. At a whopping 105 carats, the Koh-i-Noor Diamond might look beautiful, but this reportedly cursed gemstone has a bit of a dark side. The diamond once belonged to the ferocious Sikh Maharaja Ranjit Singh, who died during the Anglo-Sikh Wars, leaving his young son, Duleep, as the last Maharaja of the empire. Now, when the East India Company seized control over the empire, Duleep was kidnapped by the British Crown and exiled to Britain, where he was adored by Queen Victoria, who became godmother to several of his descendants, including Princess Sophia, who went on to become a prominent suffragette. The infamous precious stone was also taken by the British Crown and is part of the British Crown jewels to this day, but legend. And the stone's tumultuous origins have earned it the reputation of causing death and misfortune to any male who owns it. Well, apparently since being owned by the British royal family, it's only ever been worn by gals for safety. Let's keep it that way. Within Roman military history, the Greco-Roman Ballista was a weapon similar to the crossbow, but at a larger scale, which fired arrows or stones. In 1989, archaeological works were being carried out on the Israeli-Syrian border. These ballista balls were found alongside what appeared to be the remains of a ballista. Well, a couple years later, in 1995, some ammunition of the Roman war artifact was stolen from the site, but the theft wasn't noticed. Time passed, and in 2015, several rock balls that matched the ones found in the diggings appeared in the courtyard of a museum with a note. This note, supposedly written by the thief, stated that after stealing the balls, he had experienced profound bad luck, and he believed them to be cursed. Unofficial reports claim that among the calamities the person describes in his note, he comments that ruin fell upon him, as he had a prosperous business that ended suddenly when those rocks came into his life. It is also said that sometime later his family abandoned him, and he was forced to get rid of many other possessions to settle debts and avoid bankruptcy until he realized the origin of his problems. Get rid of them. The vine ring, or the Ring of Silvianus, is a gold ring dating probably from the 4th century AD, and it was discovered in a plowed field near Silchester in Hampshire, England in 1785. It's unknown how the ring came to be located at the vine, but it is presumed that the farmer who found the ring sold it to the family, who are known to have an interest in history and antiquities. Well, in 1888, the owner of the property, Chandler Shute, wrote about the ring and the history of the house. Turns out in 1929, the archaeologist Sir Mortimer Wheeler was excavating at the Litany site and made a connection between the ring bearing the name of, you know the name, and the cursed stone bearing the same name. Who'd he call upon? J.R.R. Tolkien, as professor of Anglo-Saxon at Oxford University, to investigate the etymology of the name referred to in the curse. So you know Lord of the Rings? Welcome to its origins. Also, Roman tablets are found to contain references to the artifact, informing the god Nodens that the ring had been stolen. In the tablet, the former owner of the ring proclaims that whoever has taken the ring shall find themselves in bad health until it is given back to its owner. So just give it back. One of the most famous examples of haunted art throughout history is the cursed portrait of Spanish military leader Bernardo de Galvez. Possibly made by Salvador Maella, the painting appears like a typical portrait, but the way it was painted produces a certain discomfort for anybody who ends up appreciating this work of art. So this cursed artifact depicts Bernardo, born in the city of Malaga, Spain on July 23rd of 1746, who died under strange circumstances on November 30th of 1786. So he was famous for helping the American colonies during the War of Independence of the United States. This painting is located at the Galvez Hotel in Galveston, Texas, a place whose fame is, well, directly related to, you guessed it, ghosts and other paranormal phenomena. There is a group of spirits that tend to inhabit the hotel, and the most intriguing and terrifying stories tend to take place around this lovely little portrait. The painting is located at the end of a corridor inside the hotel, where the portrait's eyes are said to follow passing guests. If you get too close to this work of art, you're going to feel freezing cold or uncomfortable. There's even those who claim that Bernardo himself comes down from the cursed item and follows you around the hotel. The haunted reputation of this portrait naturally represents an attraction for tourists trying to take a picture of the painting, but you're not going to get a clear image of it unless you request permission from the man himself. Inside the Baker Mansion in Altoona, USA is the wedding dress of Anna Baker, who fell in love with an ironworker. Legends claim that she eloped from her home to get married to her lover, but her father forcefully brought her back and locked her in her bedroom. She then refused to marry anybody else and spent the rest of her life alone. So after her death, the members of the Baker family reported spotting her wedding dress at a lot of different places just around the house. Some folks even saw the spirit of Anna herself moving around the house dressed in her wedding dress. So sad. The Burton Agnes Hall in Burton Agnes, England is home to a creepy paranormal object called the Screaming Skull. Now this is believed to be the skull of Catherine Ann Griffith, who died in the same house after being attacked by bullies in 1620. Every night, a terrifying ghost is seen roaming around the skull, making tremendous noise and scaring out everybody who tries to touch it. Or worse yet, take it away. This next item, popularly known as Busby's Stoop chair, it is a wooden piece of furniture that is cursed by the spirit of Thomas Busby, who was known to ruthlessly kill people. Before meeting the rope necklace for his crimes, he requested to have a meal in his favorite local pub, and upon finishing said meal, he stood and said, "May sudden death come to anybody who dares sit on my chair." And ever since then, 63 people who dared to sit on said chair met untimely and terrifying deaths. I'm sorry, somebody out there waited until the death toll got to 63 before thinking, maybe there's something wrong. I don't know. I feel like that link should have been noticed by death number 20. Later on in history, the owner of the pub donated the chair to the museum, and it's still there. It's hanging about 1.5 to 2 meters off the ground. Why? Well, we don't want any further deaths. I don't know. I don't think that's high enough. People will still find a way. Maybe up on the ceiling, or just put it in a box forever. And finally for today, for centuries a common wedding gift given to brides of royalty and wealth were these intricate and expensive vases. Back in the 12th century, the Duchess Eleanor of Aquitaine gifted her husband-to-be, King Louis, a rock crystal vase. So it wasn't unusual when a woman in the 15th century received a vase as a wedding gift, except it was silver, plain looking. There was no intricate markings, no lavish decorations, and it didn't appear to be expensive, but it contained a curse that would continue to take lives for the next 5 centuries. Not much is known about the woman who originally received the vase way back then, other than her wedding took place in a northern village close to Italy. The stories say she didn't know who gifted her the 4-pound silver vase, but she took it to her room for safekeeping. And when the wedding was about to start, nobody could find her. Her husband-to-be searched for her and found her in her room, lying on the ground, clutching the vase with a fierce grip before passing away just moments later. Well, at her funeral, the now Basano vase was given to one of her family members for safekeeping. But within days, they were also dead. At the time, nobody thought the vase was the cause of it, and they gave it to somebody else. Yeah, anybody want to guess? You guessed it. A couple days later, they croaked. The family finally put 2 and 2 together and reached out to a priest for guidance, under the belief that whoever gifted the bride the vase put a curse on it, or had it made with cursed materials. They were instructed to bury it on sacred grounds. Well, a lot of folks believed it was buried near the same church where the priest resided, but it's not exactly known where it was buried, since it stayed clear of the history books for around 500 years. In 1988, an unnamed man happened to dig up the vase, and within it found a note reading, "Beware, this brings death." He ignored the note, tossed it away, brought the vase to an auction house. Yep, those who ignore history, doomed to repeat it. It was sold to a local pharmacist for the equivalent of $2,000 in today's money. Well, 3 months later, the pharmacist had passed, and his family sold the vase to a doctor, who also passed away. Yeah, deja vu. Here we go. So at this point, the reputation was coming back. Nobody wanted to buy it, minus one archaeologist, who, 3 months later, died from an unknown and mysterious infection. The family was kind of freaked out. They tossed it out of a window, then a cop found it, tried to give it to museums, and all of them were like, nope, nope, nope. To this day, no one knows where it is anymore.
Top 10 cursed artifacts that scientists can't explain. Number 10. The Screaming Skull of Burton Agnes Hall. The Screaming Skull of what? That sounds like a horror film right off the bat. Let's talk about it. The Screaming Skull of Burton Agnes Hall is a legend surrounding an English county house in Yorkshire. Yeah, as you could guess, it's terrifying. The story goes that Anne Griffith, one of the daughters of Sir Henry Griffith, who built the hall back in the 17th century, well, she was attacked and mortally wounded. Now, before meeting her sad demise, Anne had one request. She asked for her head to be kept inside the house forever. Just the head, just that one head, just that's it. The rest of it doesn't matter. Just the cool, awesome. When it was removed, supernatural disturbances occurred until the skull was eventually returned to its rightful place, I want to say. It's said that if the skull is removed, eerie noises and disturbances plague the hall. So, yeah. Oh, I shouldn't touch the mummy head from the 17th century? Ah, damn it. I always thought I could poke it. Easy. Number 9. Peck Island. A cursed island. How does that even happen? That's almost impressive. Peck Island, located in the Detroit River near Windsor, Ontario, revolves around the story of Hiram Walker. Walker was a Canadian entrepreneur who owned the island in the late 19th century, and legend has it that Walker planned to build a grand mansion on the island, but it was quickly thrown off its course by a series of misfortunes and tragedies, all of which is believed to be a part of this island curse. Now, the mansion was never completed, of course, and the island is now known for its ghost stories and tales of buried treasure. Yeah, you can't tell me that. You can't be like, oh, the island's cursed and forbidden, but also there's treasure there, so I don't know, may the odds be ever in your favor, I guess. Good luck. Number 8. Bela Lugosi's mirror. Best known for his role as Count Dracula, haunting off the bat, this mirror reportedly belonged to Lugosi, and it is said that he gazed into it frequently. Of course he did. It's a mirror. That's the only thing you can do. That's not exactly the crazy part. The crazy part here is after his death, the mirror is believed to have passed through various hands, with each owner experiencing disturbing occurrences, suggesting that the mirror may in fact be haunted. A haunted mirror, you're like, ah, it's me, it's my face. I just roasted myself, I guess. These events have led to a legend that Lugosi's spirit, or something connected to him, is stuck inside the mirror. Do we break it and then release him? Do we not break it? Is that bad luck? What do we even do at this point? I don't know. Do you believe in a haunted mirror? Just cover it up. Problem solved. Put a doily over it. I'm like, I'm good. Number 7. Haunted chairs of Belcourt Castle. Haunted chairs, that's awesome. That sounds like the haunted mansion in real life, zipping around your house. That's amazing. The haunted chairs of Belcourt Castle in Newport, Rhode Island. They have a history of paranormal lore, if you want to call it that. That's the lore right there. A chair moves sometimes. It's a safety hazard really at this point. Watch your step. Built in 1894 by Oliver Hazard Perry Belmont, a really long name, the castle is known for its collection of antiques and artifacts, all that smell incredibly great and old and dusty and horrible to breathe in, including several chairs that are said to be super haunted. Everything else is just old and fine, but the chair's demon in that chair for sure. Visitors and staff have reported feeling a force pushing them out of these chairs, which I know must be frightening when you're sitting there, but when I think of that, it's hilarious. It's now a cartoon. Whoa! Baker's haunted wedding dress. Normally, wedding dresses are reminders of the best day of your life, right? You look at it, you're like, yes, I was there, we're in love, awesome. At least that's what they're supposed to feel like. When it comes to the Baker's wedding dress, there's nothing but terror. Yeah, all in those laces right there. You zip it up, it's horrible in the back. In 1849, Anna Baker, a rich young gal from a rich Pennsylvania family, fell in love with a low-class iron worker. And her father did not want her to marry a man from the lower class, because how dare she do that, right? Ugh. He forbid the wedding, all that stupid old stuff, but unbeknownst to the father, Anna had already bought a dress. She was excited, she was in love, she was committed, alright? It was the 1800s, so there was for sure a no-return policy, so Anna remained single until the end of her days. She died in 1914, and rumor has it, she passed away with that very same wedding dress still in her arms. Now after that, the house was turned into a museum, because why, of course, and the dress is now said to move on its own within its display case, supposedly manifesting Anna's restless and unhappy spirit. It's amazing, there's a floaty dress, it's like a Spider-Man villain. That's the scariest one so far. Number 5, Robert the Evil Doll. First of all, Robert, it's not a scary doll name, but don't let it fool you, okay? This guy here, just as bad as Annabelle. A man named Rob Otto, he was given a doll that looked a lot like him, alright? This is how the story begins. You know how you get a doll that looks like you? Sure, that happens all the time. One of his servants who didn't like him made this doll for him. Yeah, you already know where I'm going with this one. It was a voodoo doll, right? Of course. Why would you accept this? This is obviously a trap. Neighbors would hear Robert talking to this doll. Robert and Robert, the podcast. Tune in. Awesome. Now, after Robert's death, the new owners of the house found that same doll in the attic, still there. Well, actually, their daughter found it. It was a pretty jarring experience. The family was haunted by this doll for years. They would hear threats coming from it. They would talk to them at night. Everything that you don't want to hear, it happened to them. So now the doll is on display in a museum in Key West. Do we believe in this one? I don't know. I'm a bit skeptical. Annabelle, maybe. Robert? Not as scary. Try again, pal. Fix your name first. Mandy the Haunted Doll. There we go. We got another doll. This one sounds a little bit more frightening. Apparently, the most malicious entities on the planet take the form of a doll. Who knew? Mandy the Doll, remember this name. Mandy lives in the Quesnel Museum in Canada, and the staff at the museum insists that Mandy is kept in a separate display case. Because when Mandy shares a case with other dolls, these other dolls would magically end up being knocked over in the middle of the night. Turns out Mandy loves attention, huh? Staff also reported their lunches disappearing on occasion, but me personally, I think that they're reaching at that point. That's just a greedy coworker who's blaming it on a doll. That's a different thing. That's one guy, you gotta go find him. That's not the doll. Number 3, Pompei artifacts. I love geology and history and all that stuff here on Bumblebee, it's great, but it's hard not to want to bring something home after you visit a famous landmark. But depending where you go, you could get in a lot of trouble for, stealing a rock. Sounds silly, but listen up. Pompei, for example, once a flourishing Roman city located near the Bay of Naples in Italy, that was, of course, until 79 AD when Mount Vesuvius erupted and it buried the entire city and sadly its inhabitants under layers of ash and pumice. Now, the eruption was so powerful that it wiped out all of life within a 16-mile radius. Pompei, of course, remained buried and forgotten for almost 1700 years until it was rediscovered in 1748. Today, Pompei is an archaeological site that offers a glimpse into ancient Roman life with well-preserved ruins of homes, public buildings, streets, artwork, you name it. It's all there. It's great. And there's a great amount of people who steal from this ancient landmark. Because of course there are. How to get cursed 101. This is how you do it. Tourists would steal fragments of monuments, literally pieces of the city, put it in their pocket and go home. But every year, roughly 100 packages get sent back to the archaeological superintendents, and most of them are accompanied with a letter explaining the bad luck that occurred with this piece of rock that they stole. So don't take things that don't belong to you. Alright, cheers. Number 2, the Anguished Man. I mean, first of all, aside from its dark history, who would be able to look at this and have this hanging up in their home? This is terrifying. Imagine this on your wall. That's from The Conjuring. That's a horrible thing to look at. I would take that down immediately. The Anguished Man is a painting with history. It is said to be haunted by the spirit of the artist who created it, a man who mixed his own blood into the paint as he worked. Yeah, real artsy guy. I love when people do that. Awesome. Don't do that at all. The painting has been passed down through generations of the artist's family, but each owner has reported strange occurrences while in possession of the haunting piece. Some have claimed to hear whispers and moaning coming from the painting late at night, which is it's pretty scary. It's also kind of funny to imagine a painting just being like, You're like, what was that? That's kind of beautiful. Is that an E minor? Would you spend the night with this haunted painting? I would. I don't know. I'm a skeptic. I would just, again, not look at it. I would hang it up and then turn this way. It's kind of creepy. I don't know if I could do that. Now I get it. No way. Number 1, James Dean's car. Buckle in for this last one, folks. James Dean's love for fast cars was of course well known, and sadly because one of them led to his tragic death at the age of 24. He died by doing something he loved, which is, okay, some silver lining to it. Some are convinced that his cars were cursed the entire time. Dean's first car was involved in an accident that left him with a broken leg, and his second car, the one that he famously died in after colliding head-on with another vehicle, I mean, that's already too many. That's 2 accidents, that's 2 cursed cars. That's tragic history right there, but after Dean's death, that's when the hauntings begin. The Porsche was sold off and quickly became infamous for causing more accidents and more deaths. One of the owners even reported seeing the ghost of James Dean beside them in the passenger seat while they were driving before crashing. I would have crashed too. If I saw any ghost beside me, I'd be like, oh my god, that would be it, no matter what, James Dean or not. The car disappeared from public view in the late 1960s and has since been rumored to be hidden away by collectors who believe it to be cursed. Do you own the car? Is that you out there? Where is this thing hiding? I kind of want to take it for a spin. I don't know, I'm kind of weird like that. Would you drive in this car?